Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Again, I'm Brad Larson, the founder of Story Habitat, and we focus on gathering stories in museum exhibits. I started out as technology developer at the Children's Museum in Boston and began working with museums after I left the museum on gathering stories in exhibits, and that's continued to grow. I love looking for ways that we can help organizations connect to their audiences through the stories. So the first topic is why stories and anniversaries? What is that synergy there? Why do I think those two go so well together? One thing I should say is we've had a lot of interest and a lot of projects recently focusing on stories and anniversaries. And through that experience, we've really seen how this combination of stories and anniversaries are a natural fit. One topic idea is that, first of all, stories pull in the audience directly as participants. So as we look through some of these screenshots from different installations, we see people verbalizing, communicating. Those are all really great things. There's a lot of visitor learning research. John Falking, John Falk, Linda Dierking, Minda Boren, and others who really have pointed out that if we're getting our visitors, our audiences to verbalize their experience, that's really the goal. That's fantastic. And so a lot of our goal was to help organizations help their audiences communicate their experience. So that's one of the reasons why I think stories and anniversaries are such a good combination. Another thing from the organization standpoint, the anniversaries provide this great opportunity to reflect on the organization's journey. So it's not just the past. We're not just looking at 100 years ago or 200 years ago. We're also looking at the present and the future. So in our projects with the City of Durham and the Museum of Durham History, there were a lot of focus on both the 150 years behind, but also on the present and where are we going in the future. With the ASDC, which just celebrated or commemorated its 50th anniversary a few weeks ago, we've been working with them over the last year, gathering stories, and great to have Wendy Pollock here, who was such a contributor to ASDC for so long. And thinking about the future, one of the fun projects was with Marco Island Heritage Center for the Arts, where one of their collections objects was related to the space industry and capsules. And so we created this idea of a story capsule, a time capsule, looking to the future, where you can record your stories to the future. So thinking about not just the past, but the present and the future is a natural sort of thing to do when you're thinking about stories and anniversaries. And one final point is that anniversaries can be celebrated or commemorated for the whole year. So unlike some events that may just happen over a weekend, many organizations celebrate especially big anniversaries like 150 or 125, not just on one particular day or weekend, but actually over the whole year. And it provides a great opportunity to segment out different initiatives throughout the year, all focusing on the anniversary and gathering stories for the anniversary. So then the question is, how did we get here? How did we get this process focusing on stories, and what are some of the different components that get us to what I think of as community storytelling? I started out in the museum world working in exhibits at Boston Children's Museum as an exhibit developer, technology developer. And the thing about recording stories in exhibits is that it's something that's always there, always ready to go, always ready to record. This is an early one we did with the American Visionary Art Museum in Baltimore. I always joke that it's back when I used to dye my hair. So it's been a while. And that's a station where we were asking about the community. What one thing would you change about your city? That was a fun installation. Also with the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. in their human rights gallery at the end. It's an opportunity to record your impressions and your thoughts. For the Albuquerque Museum, an opportunity to share your story. And this again is pointing out the power of having a physical place that's always ready to go, always ready to gather stories, and that's a great thing about museum exhibits. And then this one is from our work with California Science Center for their dogs exhibit. Everybody has a story about their dog if you have a dog. And so that's been really popular. So part of it is looking for those topics, looking for those angles that people naturally want to talk about. Then I became interested in pop-up exhibits. It's great to have something where people are funneling into the museum and gathering their stories, but how can we get more out into the community and gather stories that way? And so pop-up events over the last decade or more have really been a hot topic, I think, in the museum world. And so looking for ways of getting out into the community. We did a project with the Washington Post magazine on the National Mall, gathering stories about people's experience on the National Mall, what draws you to the mall. And then the Post did Washington Post magazine did a feature on that, and we're able to print some of the stories we gathered, as well as create some for their website. So that's another side note. Working with local news media is another option, I think, that can really add a lot to some of the anniversary initiatives. This is the Story Bike, which we created with our friends at 42 Design Fab. Very popular. We mounted the technology on the back of a three-wheeled bicycle and took it out to the Fresh Paint Mural Arts Festival in Springfield, Massachusetts. And so that was such a happy community gathering, people from all over coming together to celebrate the community art, the murals, and then tapping into that to gather stories. And so pop-up events are another great opportunity for gathering stories. We also worked with Friends of the Waterfront in Seattle, gathering stories about the waterfront and people's connection to the waterfront. This is in Seattle, outside of the what is it called? The Pike Place, is that right? I forget, market. So setting up in markets, farmers markets, other gathering places can be a great place and a great way to gather stories. And one other component beyond that, so we've got exhibits, pop-up events. There's another component, online story gathering. So working with the Museum of Durham History, they did an exhibit on women in politics. And so we developed an online tool so they could email a simple link out to some of the people that they knew they wanted to gather stories from, and got some fantastic stories coming back just by sending the link out and getting the stories. And we also developed a content management system allowing museums, to coordinate the two, so you can gather stories both in the museum and on users' devices, and then review the stories up on the CMS. So anyway, that's sort of the multi-layered approach to gathering stories, looking for different inroads into it. Exhibits, they're always ready to go. Pop-up events, it's getting out into the energy of community events. And then online is always a great way to reach people who may not actually physically come into a specific area. So looking for different ways of using those three, I think, is one of the good points about thinking about stories and anniversaries. Now, I wanted to look at some examples from different projects. So one that I mentioned before was working with ASTC, Association of Science and Technology Centers. They were celebrating their 50th anniversary just this year, and so had been ramping up to show some of the stories from the community on people's experience in ASTC. And so they compiled those on a website. Um, Before jumping into that, I just want to mention there was one thing I was going to do. It occurred to me just before I got on here. I'm looking out at the beautiful leaves here in New England, turning reds and yellows, and was reminded I wanted to acknowledge the nature and the land and the people who came here before, and that's the Wampanoag and Massachusetts people. generally feeling the more we appreciate the world around us and the people who are still around us and with us, the better we all are. So that was a quick note. Now let's jump into ASTC and take a look at what they did with some of their stories and story gathering. If I have this all set up correctly, we should be able to play back a story or two. So this is their website. You see it's in a section ASTC 50. The nice thing is they can keep that website up as long as they want. They can keep the videos and the media up there as long as they want. And so this becomes a piece that can remain even after the year is done. And I think stories have always been a great way to add a piece that remains after an event passes. So they have an introduction sharing the story of our field and then some opportunities. So we could go and record now using our server to record. But I wanted to go and take a look at some of the stories that were recorded so we can see the compilation. And they did a great job compiling these and giving them special fireworks treatments. So there was a lot of great work that the ASTC staff did. And you can see we got a lot of stories. It's interesting when we have the option of pulling in stories from outside of the organization, we can reach out to special celebrities, local VIPs, and we were able to get a story from actors Susan Yeagley and Kevin Nealon, who are big fans of science and science museums. I'll play just a section of that.
Hey everybody, I'm Susan Yeagley.
I'm Kevin Nealon, and we are big fans of science. Let's start off with that.
We love science, and we actually know how to spell it.
That's right. SCIENCE. Yeah, science.
Yeah.
No. So here's the thing about science museums. We travel a lot. We have traveled a lot for a long time. And the first place we find when we're in town for our son is the Science Museum.
Thank God.
So it's a wonderful little story. It can be nice to have familiar people speaking to the value of the organization. This is a story that we recorded just a couple of weeks ago at the ASTC conference from a staff member who's working really on the mission, and ASTC really focused on the mission and when they were thinking about their 50th anniversary, the mission of the organization and the mission of science museums.
In rural areas like the North Country Children's Museum in upstate New York, one of the ways that we've reached out and helped other organizations is last summer we got to do some collaboration with a tribal reservation Boys and Girls Club, the Akwesasne Boys and Girls Club, right on the other side of Canada from our Steen Children's Museum. And I got to go up there and
so it was great to gather again, focusing right into the mission of the organization and gathering stories of how members of the community are tapping into that mission. So I was inspired when I heard Daniel's story. Coming back, also universities, Harvard Law School had their 200th anniversary a few years ago. They compiled some of the stories that we gathered in an alumni reflections website. And so we can scroll through different questions, best experience outside the classroom, strongest classroom memory, the difference HLS, Harvard Law School, has made in your life. And so it can be inspiring just to play some of these stories.
Law school has made a profound difference in my life. I'm eternally grateful. I consider this campus hallowed ground. It is a special place to me that I love to come back to. As a law student, I went through what I call an intellectual maturation process.
So it can be inspiring to hear directly from people, from alumni, from museum members and community members, the value that a community or an organization has related to the anniversary year. And then we worked with the Museum of Durham History, who was also working in conjunction with the city of Durham when Durham had its 150th anniversary. And they compiled a playlist. And I think compiling a YouTube playlist is a great way to simply and easily put videos up in a public space that could be referenced later. So we'll take a quick look at that. So this is for their Durham 150th event. There are a number of questions. How have you witnessed history in Durham? What memories stand out for you? What would you want to tell someone new to town about Durham? We'll just play a few seconds of that.
I would say be part of Durham by getting to know the people. Durham is all about a warm community, small businesses, families who come together, a very supportive, warm, close-knit community. So get to know the people around you, get to go to small businesses, go to the farmers markets.
So these are short videos. They're all mostly all less than a minute or so. And I think that that's an important piece too, that we want videos that are going to be easy to use, things that are going to be either a thumbs up or a thumbs down in terms of sharing them without requiring a lot of editing to use later. And then one of the things that I always tell people when we're working with a museum or an organization, a great starting point is just to think about what questions do you want to ask your audience. And so I'll ask them a lot of times, what are 3 questions? And it seems a little arbitrary, but I like the number 3. And I also think that actually coming up with questions can make a huge difference in communicating with other staff. Like, oh, we want to ask people about who is inspiring in the community, or we want to ask people about different things. And so I'd say that'd be a great starting point for anyone, any organization thinking about gathering stories for an anniversary. It's just, what are the questions we want to ask? One of the lenses, as we talked about earlier, for anniversaries is looking at this lens of past, present, and future. And so it's not just the past, but also the future. So we can ask questions like, what event in our community will you never forget? Who or what in our community inspires you today? So we've got the past, the present, and record a message for community members 50 years from now, a sort of story time capsule. So those are all approaches we can look at in terms of what we're going to ask our visitors, our audience, or our community. Another lens that we could look at is through the organizational mission. And that's what we saw when we were looking at the ASTC website. It's looking at what impact have museums and science museums had in their community. So we could ask questions like, what project in our organization has had an impact in our community? Or if we're thinking in a community about public education or schools or universities, tell us about a teacher who made a big difference in your life. And I think if we all reflect on that, that's the sort of question where it doesn't take a lot of thinking usually to get a picture or an image of someone. And so there's a process of testing out questions and saying, do I resonate with that? You know, even before thinking about any bigger initiative, ask other staff members, is this question interesting to you? See if you can have a conversation around it. But really, I think the first starting point is to think about what questions do we want to ask our audience. And from that seed, other initiatives can grow out and we can get a better handle on the big picture and the mission and what we really want to accomplish around the anniversary. And so one other topic, and this is the final topic, and then we'll open it up for questions, is strategies to expand community outreach. So I remember I had a point about 8 years ago where I realized that our story installations, I'm thinking of them less as museum installations and more as community installations. So if we take that lens, if we think this is a community installation, where does that lead us? Then that can point us in a number of interesting directions. And so this may seem simple and like a little piece of advice that's okay, whatever, I understand. but just identify other organizations that may collaborate with story gathering. Make it a community event, not just an organizational event. And that could be local library or universities, or a lot of great collaborations happening between universities and museums and other organizations. So to start to look at a community as this interconnected thing and start to look to ways to gather stories with those interconnections is a powerful piece to community story gathering. As well, town offices and offices, historical offices within town governments can also be a nice connection point to begin doing a community oriented story gathering. Seek out community events to attend with pop-up exhibits. So again, it doesn't have to be an event that the organization solely focuses itself. It could be a pre-existing popular event, and the organization or the community takes part of it and takes part with sort of a pop-up exhibit. This was a fun one, the Arts Learning Festival in Melbourne, Australia. We got to go there and record people's stories about learning in festivals in conjunction with Harvard's Project Zero. Again, public markets like the Pike Place Market and other events, the Fresh Paint Arts Festival. So looking for ways of tapping into existing community events to tap into stories as well is a big piece of it. And the third piece is to incorporate online tools to complement in-person story gathering. So we've seen things that are both exhibit oriented as well as things that could be focused on the technology and could be used through a simple link to reach out and ask members to record their stories. So those are different strategies for expanding out as an organization is commemorating or celebrating a special anniversary. I think the big summary is, again, back where we started, is that the stories have a special role in commemorating anniversaries throughout the whole year. And so again, that dynamic of stories plus a community plus a whole year of focusing using different lenses and angles, I think is a very powerful way of doing community storytelling. And I managed to keep it under a half an hour. It's 2:27 now, and I figured we would do half an hour of me talking, but then also open it up for questions, or if there are other observations as well, we're open to that too. And as you see, there's my email address. You can also check out our website. I'd be happy to do a demo online. You can just check the calendar and schedule a date and set up for that.